Hello and welcome to another episode of LGOtv Big Talk. And why Big Talk? Because I hate small talk. In fact, I find small talk draining, exhausting, actually distracting from the kinds of conversations I really want to have. And the person who I'm having today on the show is one of the biggest talkers I know, Nir Eyal. And Nir writes, consults, and teaches about the intersection of psychology, technology, and business. He previously taught as a lecturer in marketing at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford. He co-founded and sold two tech companies since 2003 and was dubbed by the MIT Technology Review as the prophet of habit-forming technology. So you may be thinking, why, Laura, are you talking to somebody about habit-forming stuff and also talking about not being distracted? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because this is the guy who understands how to build products that are there to help you become indistractable. He also understands what's behind the ones that distract you every single day by forming the bad habits. In addition to blogging at nirandfar.com, that's N-I-R, and far.com. His writing's been featured in the New York Times, the Harvard Business Review, Time Magazine, and Psychology Today. You know, little stuff. Nir invests in habit-forming products that improve users' lives, and some of his past investments include things that you have used, like Eventbrite, or Anchor FM, which was acquired by Spotify, Kahoot, which my kids use in school, Canva, which I use to basically do all the stuff that I put online, and lots and lots and lots more. So, Nir, welcome to Big Talk.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with you.
So I also want to welcome you. I mean, you were there before me, but you're part of the Yellow Book Club. So
Yes.
I wore yellow here today in your honor.
Thank
Last
you.
week we had Zoe Chance, who also has a yellow book, and our pal Todd Herman has a yellow book. So all the best books are yellow books.
It's true. There's definitely something to that, right?
There is something to that. I don't know quite what, but there is something. There is, maybe it's because yellow gets you hooked. I know your first book was called Hooked. So you write a lot about how to get people hooked, how to create habits, how to form habits, but you also write about controlling your attention and choosing your life. So one might think, well, all of these technology companies and tech platforms are there to hook us and get habits and to addict us. And yet you're also writing about how not to do that. So did you figure out the dark arts and now you're helping us shield from them, or are they all how do they intersect?
Well, we can have both, right? So the idea behind Hooked is that we can build healthy habits with the technology we use. And that book was written primarily for people in business making products. And so the idea there was, how can we steal the secrets from Silicon Valley, the social media companies, the gaming companies? What can we learn from them so that we can make all sorts of good habits into healthy behaviors? So what if we could use the same things that make Instagram so sticky or Facebook so engaging? What if we could use that to help people exercise more? Well, that's exactly what Fitbod does using my Hook model. What if we could use it to get kids hooked onto education? That's exactly what Kahoot does, which also is a company that uses my Hook model. What if we could get people to save money, to connect with loved ones, to do all kinds of things, not just scrolling social media, but all kinds of healthy behaviors to improve their lives? So that's why I wrote Hooked, was to help people in business build healthy habits. Now, the flip side of that is that some products are so good that we use them to the point where we get distracted. And so I wanted to explore the other side of the equation, because this was something that I struggle with in my own life. I found several years ago that I was becoming very distractible. I remember there was one afternoon when I was with my daughter. This was really the seminal moment when I had to reconsider my relationship with distraction. We had this perfect afternoon planned, and I remember we had this book of activities that dads and daughters could do together. And one of the activities was to ask each other this question: if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want?
And at
And
this
Laura, I
moment, you're
remember,
thinking to yourself, I'm a good dad. I got
of
this book.
course,
We're doing the activities. Check.
we
I'm
planned this
doing it.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
So,
then you
and I
ask her
thought,
the question and she says,
well, I can't tell you what she said,
aha.
because I started checking my phone
Mm.
thinking that I just needed to do this one quick thing real quick.
She won't
And
notice. She's a toddler. She's a kid. She
yeah,
doesn't
by the time
notice.
I looked up from my phone, guess what? She left the room, because I was
Mm.
sending her a very clear message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And that's when I realized I had to figure this out. I had to do something about this because look, I know all their tricks. I know how these social media companies are built. I wrote the book on how they get you hooked. So I wanted to figure out, you look, what are these principles that somehow get us to overuse and become distracted by some of these technologies? And if you ask me today, what superpower I would most want, it's the power to be indistractable, because there is no area of your life, whether it's your physical health, your mental health, your relationships, your career, everything requires you to be able to sustain your attention. This is truly how we control our life and choose our life.
And it's not just parenting. I have to, there is a paragraph at the beginning of chapter 35 of your book of Indistractable, which had me like LOL, like actually laughing out loud. I'm just going to read it really quickly. Every night, my wife and I engaged in the same routine. She put our daughter to bed, brushed her teeth, and freshened up. Slipping under the covers, we exchanged glances and knew it was time to do what comes naturally for a couple in bed. She began to fondle her cell phone while I tenderly stroked the screen of my iPad. Ooh, it felt so good.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to say, I felt targeted by that paragraph. How do you have a camera in my bedroom, Nir?
Yeah. I mean, it's so distraction is something that seeps into every facet of our life, right? It didn't just happen with my daughter. It didn't just happen when I was distracted from my relationship with my wife. It would happen when I would say, "Oh, I'm definitely going to exercise today. I'm definitely going to eat right." And yet I didn't, and I wouldn't. It would happen when I would go to work and I would say, "Oh, I'm definitely going to work on that big project right now." And yet 20, 30, 45 minutes later, I'm checking email or checking the news or doing whatever else other than the thing I said I was going to do. So fundamentally, so many of us today, we know what to do. We all know what to do. Who doesn't know how to lose weight? Who doesn't know how to have better relationships, right? Be fully present with people. Who doesn't know how to excel at their job? Do the work, right?
It's
Especially
not
the hard
rocket
stuff that people don't
science.
want to do.
Yeah.
We know what to do. The problem is we don't know how to get out of our own way. We don't know how to stop getting distracted. The good news is that unlike the books that I read previously, when I researched Indistractable, I wanted to see what was written previously about this, because frankly, I didn't want to write the book if somebody came up with a solution that worked. But all the books that I read on this topic basically kind of said the same thing. Get rid of your technology, right? Stop using social media, get off email. Well, thanks, stupid. I'll get fired, right? Like I won't have a job.
It's 2022. That doesn't, and especially in the middle of a pandemic, like we needed our
Yes.
technology. Like
Absolutely. Can you imagine how horrible
work.
2020 would have been without these technologies?
We
Are you
would have been
kidding
writing
me?
letters. Yes.
It would have been terrible,
It would have
right?
been pretty bad.
So the good news is we don't have to give up this stuff,
Yeah.
right? I'm not a Luddite. I love technology. I always buy the latest gadgets and gizmos. I love this stuff. It's incredible how wonderful it is. I mean, look, you're in Boston. I'm in Singapore. We're talking for free here.
Right.
Over
people
thousands
are people are listening to it on their phones while they're commuting to work, right?
It's
incredible.
amazing. So this techno pessimism, this moral panic that technology is addicting you, that it's melting your brain, there's nothing we can do about it. It is actively harmful. When you hear people saying this stupid idea that technology is hijacking your brain, it is actively harmful. Why? Because it leads to learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is when you tell people there's nothing to be done, right? I can't do anything about it, right? I'm powerless. Well, what do people do when you tell them there's nothing they can do? Nothing. And so what I'm fighting against is this victimization that these technologies are hijacking our brains. There's nothing we can do about it, because there's so much we can do about it. We can all become indistractable.
And what's interesting to me about that is that when somebody tells you there's no hope, it's all terrible, they're pessimistic. What happens? You go, okay, I guess there's not. I have no control. I guess I'll just roll over and just be pessimistic too. And then you don't say, I'm going to fight against it. You're just like, I guess I'll just give in, which means you do even more of the worst behaviors because you don't. But if you say you actually can control it, you have agency, you have control. I mean, I just finished a 3-year research project about what's actually driving the Great Resignation. And you know what? People want agency. They want to feel like they're an active part of decision making, even if the decisions don't go their way. They want to know, they want to understand how their work actually impacts the bigger picture. They want to understand that they actually have some agency and some control in the world. But it has to be more than just hack your technology and turn off all the notifications that distract you, right? Like it's got to be better than that.
And that's what I tried at first. I read these books that basically said, technology is the source of all the evils. And so I kind of bought into that at first. That was my knee-jerk reaction. And so I did what the books told me. I got rid of my cell phone. I closed my social media accounts. I got a word processor from eBay that only had the ability to write on it, no internet connection.
Oh, I
And
tried
guess
that.
what? I guess what
I wrote
happened? So
less.
well, here's what the thing. I sat down with these technologies with no internet connection, and I thought, okay, now I'm going to get to work. By the way, I also bought a flip phone from Alibaba, the kind from the 90s, with no apps on it, no internet connection.
Did Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer call you?
Exactly. Yeah, it was so cool with a little flip phone back then. But that's what I got because I thought, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe it is all modern technology's fault. And here's the thing: I would sit down at my desk without an internet connection, without any of these distracting apps. And I would say, okay, now I'm going to write. Nothing's going to get in my way. I'm not going to get distracted. But, there's that book on the bookshelf that I've been meaning to do some research into. Or look at my desk. Boy, isn't it messy? Or, the trash should be taken out. Let me just take care of that real quick. And I kept getting distracted because here's the most important lesson of what I learned in my 5 years of research is that 90% of our distractions come from within. They're called internal triggers. And studies have verified this, that when they survey people and they ask them when they get distracted from their phone throughout the day, 10% of the time it's because of an external trigger, these pings, dings, and rings that can lead us off track, right? Things that happen on your phone, the things in your outside environment. But 90% of the time we get distracted, it's not because of what's happening outside of us, it's about what's happening inside of us. And so that's where we have to start on our journey to become indistractable. It's mastering these internal triggers: loneliness, boredom, fatigue, uncertainty, stress, anxiety. If you don't master those internal triggers, they become your master, because distraction, fundamentally, it's not a moral failing. There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain's not broken. It's simply our inability to deal with discomfort. That's why I say time management requires pain management. Time management requires pain management. I would also add weight management, money management. All human behavior requires us to deal with discomfort. And so we have to learn that skill. It's not a skill we're often taught, but that is the first step to becoming indistractable, because most people, whenever they feel bored, lonely, stressed, indecisive, they want to escape it, right? They escape that discomfort with turning on the news, drinking a shot of booze, Facebook, football. They'll find an excuse, something to take their mind off that discomfort. Whereas what I found in my research is that high performers, they don't try and escape the discomfort. They lean into the discomfort. They use those internal triggers like rocket fuel to move them towards traction rather than trying to escape it with distraction.
Yeah, it's funny because my office is right next door to my kitchen. And I've worked from home for 20 years. I mean, I ran a company that was fully virtual before COVID. We were remote before it was COVID cool. And whenever I would have to do something that was hard, I didn't want to do it. It was difficult. It hurt my brain. It took a lot to like get going. So I'd go have a snack, because it was like, that was easy. It was in, it was out. It was like emotionally, it felt like I got something done. It, gave me whatever sort of dopamine hit that I needed. So I was like, I can't do that. I can't be right next to the kitchen. I'm going to gain 1 billion pounds. So I moved my office up to the 3rd floor, right? So my kitchen's on the 1st floor, my office is on the 3rd floor. And you know what? I still had just as many snacks, because it was easier to go down to the 1st floor and back up to the 3rd floor than to deal with the thing that I wanted to deal with, which was like calling the client to chase the invoice, or sitting down and writing the really hard proposal, or whatever it is. So I'm a rower and I'm a marathon runner. So both of those sports involve a lot of pain and living in discomfort for great long periods of time. But here's the thing, like, as you know, I spend a lot of time as a motivational speaker. I think motivation's bullshit. Like, I think it can't come from outside. I'm going to break a promise to myself every day of the week. If it's 20 degrees outside and it is dark and my phone wakes me up, and on that phone, I also have Facebook and Instagram, I'm going to just flip through and keep looking. And all of a sudden, and during that time, I'm negotiating with myself. Like, if I get up right now, I can run 6 miles and shower and wash my hair and blow it dry before I'm meeting. Oh, I'm flipping a little longer. Okay, if I get up right now, I can run 4 miles and, wash my hair and blow it dry before the meeting. Oh, if I go right now, I could do 3 miles and I could wear my hair in a ponytail, right? And I just, and I negotiate and I negotiate and I negotiate until then it's like, I guess today will be a rest day. But if I
Right.
know I'm meeting you to like run the Harvard Stadium and it is -10 degrees outside and there's ice and it's sleeting, I'm still going to show up because I'll break a promise to myself every day of the week, but I won't break a promise to you. So
Yeah.
it's this like I'm willing to like I need the external motivation if it comes from someone else because I can't do it on my own unless I've got like a marathon coming up or a race coming up and I have to do it or else
Yeah.
that's going to be a bad day. So
By the way,
how
this
do
is
we build
super
this?
common.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
super common.
Good.
And this is the goal of becoming indistractable, right? That what we find is that people are super honest with others, right?
Yes.
One of the worst put down someone can call you is to claim that you're a liar, right? It's very offensive to call someone a liar.
Mhm.
We would never want to lie to our friends, to our family, to
Right.
our colleagues. That would be a terrible thing. And yet, like you said, we lie to ourselves all the time.
Every day.
We say we're going to exercise. We don't. We say we're going to eat right. Maybe tomorrow. We say we're going to work on that big project. Not so much. Right. Like,
Right.
and which is so ironic because, it's you're lying to yourself.
Right.
And so that's what becoming indistractable is all about. It's not about necessarily never getting distracted. I made up this word indistractable, right? So I can define it any way I want. Becoming indistractable doesn't mean you never get distracted. It means you strive to be as honest with yourself as you are with others. And so how do we do that? Paulo Coelho has a wonderful quote. He said, a mistake repeated more than once is a decision. A
Mhm.
mistake repeated more than once is a decision. How many times can we get distracted by the same thing again and again? Okay, I get it. Social media is distracting. Okay, now what? What are you going to do now? You're going to wait for the geniuses in Washington to fix this problem for you? Or are you going to do something about it, right? How many times do we keep getting distracted by the news, by our kids, by our pets, by whatever, before we say, okay, I get it. I'm going to do something about it now. So a distractible person keeps getting distracted by again and again by the same things. They're making the decision to be distractible. An indistractable person says, okay, you got me once, but you're not going to get me again because I'm going to do something about it today. I'm going to prevent getting distracted tomorrow by doing something today. So how do we do that? The first step is making sure that we master those internal triggers. You need to have tools at your disposal, ready to go, so that when you don't feel like doing something, you can deal with that discomfort. This is why we don't do what we say we're going to do, right? The number one reason we don't achieve our goals. What's the number one reason we don't achieve our goals? We quit. So obvious. The number one reason we don't achieve our goals is we quit. So why do we quit? We quit because we don't feel like doing the thing we say we're going to do. We don't feel like going for the run. We don't feel like eating right. We don't feel like being, present with our family. We don't feel like doing the hard work we have to do. It's a feeling. So we have to learn techniques to deal with those feelings. And that's all they are. They're just feelings. But we don't learn these techniques. We don't learn these in school. We have to look to, there's 40 years of research around acceptance and commitment therapy and CBTI. There's all kinds of techniques that you don't have to go visit a psychiatrist. Anyone can use these techniques right away to deal with that discomfort, master those internal triggers so they don't become your master. That's step number one. Step number two is making time for traction. Here's one of the seminal rules that I learned in the book. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. Let me say that again. You cannot call something a distraction unless you know what it distracted you from. If you look at your calendar and there's a bunch of white space, right? Which is so ironic because people think, well, in order to do work, I need to clear my calendar. It's exactly the opposite.
I
That
get
when you
nothing
have
done. Yeah.
exactly when you
I
have
have to actually program things in.
right. Or even worse, they have an open day and a to-do list that's a mile long. And to-do lists are one of the worst things you can do for your personal productivity.
Yes.
It is actively harmful to run your life on a to-do list. You have to plan your time. And I mean down to the minute. Okay. And so, oh, that's so rigid. I don't know if I can do that. Okay. Well, what do you want in life? Right. If you're happy and you're getting everything you need done and you're living a great life, this book is not for you. This podcast is not for you. But if you say, look, I know I'm capable of doing more, but how do I get out of my own way? How do I stop getting distracted? You have to plan your time. And I show you how to also synchronize your schedule with the stakeholders in your life. Because people say, yeah, but what if I plan my day and my boss wants this and my kids want that and this happens? Okay, great. There are ways that we can manage that. And I've seen it 1,000 times. There's no excuse I haven't overcome yet. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is hacking back the external triggers. And this is the easiest of the bunch. This is the simple stuff like hacking back your phone, hacking back your computer. Where we really get into the nitty gritty is, wait a minute, external triggers can also come in the form of Stupid meetings we didn't need to attend. How many meetings and Zoom webinars do we attend that we really don't need to go to? How do we deal with those distractions?
Yeah.
How do we deal with the distractions of our kids, right? If we're working from home, our kids can be a huge distraction. So we have to go systematically through each and every one of those external triggers. And it turns out, good news, we can hack back all those external triggers. And then the fourth and final step is kind of what you mentioned. This is about making a pre-commitment, a pact, that the last line of defense, after you use the other three strategies, the firewall that prevents you from getting distracted is making what we call a pre-commitment. So deciding in advance that something is going to hold you accountable. So what you discussed with, wow, why is it that if I have a friend waiting for me, I'm going to show up? That's a pact. That's a pre-commitment. And so there are three types of pacts: effort pacts, price pacts, and identity pacts. And using these pacts, if you use those in concert with these other three techniques, it sounds like a lot. It's actually not. Anyone can become indistractable.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions on that. First, I'm very curious what your phone home screen looks like. I
Sure, I'll
reorganized
show you.
mine by mine by
Yes,
color, actually.
very
It's
nice.
just
Oh,
what
by
I have
color.
by color because it's just pretty. It doesn't actually really matter. So I have this one widget called Lock It, which my son introduced me to, where he just like puts a picture on there. I put a picture on there. It just randomly changes on my home screen. It's just like a little touch point, but I don't have
That's
to open
interesting.
up Instagram or anything to like see what's happening in his life. The other one
Yeah,
is my Whoop app, which, helps me just like, it reminds me like move your ass, right? And then
yeah,
the
yeah.
rest are by color. And then I've just got like the things that I need on a regular basis, but they don't make any sound. I get certain buzzes for certain people and the rest are all muted. And because here's the thing, I don't need to check my phone to know if there's a text or an email. There's always going to be a text and an email. Like I don't need to check my phone to see if there's a tweet or,
Yeah,
a Facebook message. There's always going to be a tweet or a Facebook message.
that's right.
So I don't have to do those things, but using our phones instead of our phones using us, right? Like using them for the tools that they're meant to be. I think technology is great, and in this world where we all can create our own jobs and put out our own shingle, like deleting social media off your phone is like putting a close sign on the door of your
Yeah,
business sometimes. I mean,
yeah.
it can't be that way. But I haven't quite made it to the point where I sleep with the phone in the other room. I know that that's really super healthy, but I haven't been able to do it. But here's the question that I want to ask. Although I do want to see your phone if you want to
Sure.
show
Yeah, I can show it to you. Yeah,
your
absolutely.
home screen of your phone. Um, so while you're pulling that up, what do you think about this idea of eating the frog first? Because
Mm.
I kind of hate the idea. Like I say, fuck the frog. Like, because if you all day long, if you're like, I gotta get up, I gotta go to work tomorrow, I gotta do the thing I hate most first thing. It's like you're dreading it. And it's hard. But I feel like if you just start doing the things that are still important, but are not as difficult or is not as dreadful, it's like you can give yourself some momentum, right? You can get going, you can feel good. But otherwise, you're doing all the stuff that doesn't matter because you're just putting off this one thing that at the end of the
Mm.
day is going to take you like 7 minutes, but you just don't want to do it, right? So like,
Yeah.
I don't know about the whole eat the frog first thing. And I think that leads a lot into distractibility, is when we're avoiding stuff we don't want to do.
Yeah, yeah. So you're absolutely. Oh, by the way, here, let me show you my phone real quick. So
Yeah.
it's actually not that different from yours. So I have my home screen
Hmm.
of the things I use every day. Right. There's not that many things that I use every day. And then
Yes.
there's this. The other screens are. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. Of basically folders, apps in folders that I don't use
Yes.
very often, that I have to basically search for. So there's actually nothing. It's not a bad idea to organize things by color or in folders. The idea is that if you want to make it a little bit harder to get to the distracting apps that don't serve you, perhaps. And of course, the most important thing you did, the organizing, is not that that's not going to really move the needle all that much. What really does move the needle is changing your notification settings. Can
Yes.
you believe, Laura, that 2/3 of people with a smartphone, 2/3, never change their notification settings? Can we really say, oh my God, technology is distracting us, if you haven't freaking turned off all those pings and dings? It takes 5 minutes.
That's
Right?
insanity.
Insane,
That's
insane. But
insanity.
that's
I mean,
that's kindergarten stuff, right? Like fundamentally, if you don't first go through these steps in order, the order really, really matters, because you can do all the different apps and tips and tricks on your phone, but if you have a burning desire that you can't deal with, that discomfort, you're going to find something else, because it's so important to realize distraction is nothing new. Plato, the Greek philosopher 2,500 years ago, was saying how the world is so distracting these days, right? humans have always been distracted. So you're going to find something to distract you, right? We had moral panics about books and bicycles and every new technology we freak out about. Then we think it's distracting and melting our brains. This is what we always do. When
Yeah.
really the problem isn't outside of us, it's inside of us. It's that we
Yeah.
don't know how to deal with discomfort.
I saw a funny photo where people are like, "Oh, kids today are always like focused on their phone." It was a bunch of, like teenagers in Brooklyn, like on the subway, and then their next picture was like 1947. You had a bunch of business people with like the newspapers all in their face,
Yeah,
and like nobody was looking
exactly.
at anybody else.
Exactly.
But I mean, you have these stories like you talk about Tantalus's curse, right? Or it's
Yeah.
like always reaching for something. I mean, it's been around forever, right? The siren
Forever.
call, and I forgot the Greek sailor's name, but
Odysseus.
Odysseus, right? Of course. I mean, distraction's been around for as long as time. I mean,
Right.
this is not new. The and frankly, the fact that we keep looking for new things to blame it on is just
Mm.
another thing of us saying it's not me. I don't want to be uncomfortable. It's over there.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly. We
over
like
there.
that. We like that story of, you see, it's not, if it's addictive, then
Yes.
there's a pusher. There's a
Yes.
dealer. There's someone doing it to me. It's Mark Zuckerberg. That's why I can't
It's
stop.
his
Right.
fault.
But
Yeah.
if you call it what it really is, wait a minute, it's a distraction. It's not an
Mhm.
addiction. Now, little asterisks here. Some people really do become addicted, right? Just like, not everyone who has a glass of wine with dinner is an alcoholic, but some people are. So some people really do become addicted to various technologies. It's a very small percentage, about 3 to 5% of the population. Some people really do have this pathology of addiction. It is a disease. It's not, ooh, I like it a lot. But the vast majority of us, people say, oh, I'm addicted or I have ADHD. And look, some people really do have ADHD. It's about 3% of the population. So 97% chance it's not you, right?
I do honestly feel like more people have ADHD, but I think it's because every influencer right now talks about having ADHD. I feel like it's like the hip thing to have if you're a social media influencer. And maybe it's because a lot of people who don't have ADHD feel like they have ADHD, and so they talk about having ADHD because they're on a platform where being addicted to that platform and not being able to be indistractable from it mimics that. So it's like they form a community around it almost.
Well, I don't want to minimize the actual disorder. I mean,
No, no,
it's a
no,
real struggle
absolutely.
for people who really have ADHD. Certainly for people who have addiction, it's a real pathology. The problem is kind of what you're saying is we use this terminology in a weird way, right? Nobody talks about epilepsy this way, right? But
Right.
somehow we say addiction, which is a pathology, ADHD, which is a pathology. Oh, people say, oh, I'm so ADHD. Well, wait, do you have a diagnosis?
Right, right.
Right?
And
Like
also
you,
it's like it
it's
minimizes the people who have it and it makes them
not
less serious. And
exactly,
and
exactly.
that does such a disservice.
That's exactly right. And it perpetuates this self-image. Like when you tell yourself, I'm addicted, I have ADHD, when you don't and you aren't, you're writing a script for yourself, right? You're more, and people do this in other ways too. When people say, I'm bad at time management. Well, yeah, if you think you are, you are, right?
And that
Yeah,
changes the internal that you were talking about, right? So you can't be intrinsically motivated if you also are intrinsically pessimistic.
that's right. It leads to learned helplessness, that it just doesn't
Mm,
serve you. Whereas this is exactly why I titled the book Indistractable, right? Indistractable is meant to sound like indestructible. It's meant to be a superpower. It's something that you can call yourself to say, I am indistractable, as a way for you to have a new identity. So if you've listened this far in the podcast, you don't have to read the book. You can call yourself indistractable. And this has a massive impact. Let me tell you how. So, a few decades ago, we had a far more dangerous threat in most people's lives, and that was smoking, right?
mhm.
That I remember as a kid in the 1980s, I remember everybody had ashtrays in their house. It didn't matter if you smoked or you didn't. Every household, back when 40% of the US adult population smoked, everybody in the 1980s, people who were born, after the 1980s, don't believe me.
We would sit and
Everybody had
flip them up
ashtrays.
and down on the airplanes, right? How
Exactly.
disgusting was that?
Yes.
Somebody else's
They
ash,
were in
you'd play with them
airplanes.
on the armrest.
My family had ashtrays all over the house. I don't know why nobody smoked, but my dad used to smoke, but he quit smoking. People collected ashtrays. And when someone came to your house, they just expected to smoke, right? That was just what society did,
Yeah.
until people like my mom. One day, my mom threw out the ashtrays. And when one of her friends came over and took out a pack of cigarettes and expected to smoke in our living room, she said, oh, I'm sorry. We are non-smokers. If you'd like to smoke, if you could kindly go outside. This was so offensive, right? This was such a taboo thing to do. Can you imagine if someone today came to your house and just expected to light a cigarette? That'd be crazy, right? Nobody would do that.
Crazy, right?
What changed? Was there a law that says we can't smoke in people's private residence? No, there's never been such a law. What changed was our norms, our manners, our societal rules, what we call social antibodies, spread to protect society from these harmful behaviors. So when my mom called herself and her family a new name, a new moniker, she was making what we call an identity pact. We see something very similar with the psychology of religion. When someone calls themselves a disciple of a particular religion, they are more likely to follow through on their intentions. Think about a vegetarian. When a vegetarian wakes up in the morning, they don't say, should I have a bacon sandwich for breakfast? No, they are a vegetarian. It's who they are. So your new moniker now is I am indistractable. Just like my mom said, I'm a non-smoker, and that helps spread these social antibodies. We went from 40% US adult population smoking to now 14% and dropping quickly. This is happening partially because people have a new identity. And is it any more different than someone wearing, religious garb or being a non-smoker to say, I'm indistractable? I don't respond to every message within 10 seconds. I make time in my day to work without distraction. I plan my time. Yeah. Is it weird? Yeah, it's a little different, right? It's unusual. It's not that more unusual than someone who wears a religious garb or a vegetarian. It's who you are. It is your identity. So we want to make sure we're very careful about the monikers we adopt. Most people, they adopt these monikers that make them into victims, right? I'm no good with time management. I must have something wrong with me. They moralize, they medicalize, but it doesn't serve you. Rather, adopt a moniker that serves you. Be indistractable. That is who you are.
I haven't heard it spoken exactly the way you've spoken it. What I've heard is when people say, I am a smoker, they are less likely to quit than if they say, I
That's right.
smoke. Right. So
That's right. Exactly.
So I've heard it the opposite way, which is if you put a negative moniker on yourself, you're less likely to be able to get rid of that habit. But I love this idea of actively putting a positive moniker, whatever that moniker might be, whatever the identity is that you want to have, and living into that, right? I think that's really terrific.
I'll give you one quick,
yeah.
very, very interesting quick study. There was a study that actually saw people who identified themselves as being voters versus people who plan to vote. So the noun versus the verb. People who call themselves voters were several times more likely to actually vote. How crazy is that, right? The noun form, the saying, this is who I am, is incredibly impactful.
Yeah, I always tell my kids they can be anything they want to be in the world. They just can't be non-voters. And I don't even mean every 4 years for president. I mean dog catcher. Like, I am the kind of person, I am a voter. I am a democracy nerd. I will fly home a day early from a business event to vote in an uncontested primary because I am a voter. So that's the perfect example. I totally get that.
That's it. It's identity change. Behavior change necessitates identity change.
And
that's huge.
So identity change has to come first.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's also part of it, right? First, you have to believe that that's who you are. Right. And then your actions follow your behavior, and your behaviors reinforce your identity. So it's this reinforcing loop, right? When someone says, I'm an athlete, as opposed to I want to lose weight, everything changes.
Yes.
When someone says, I'm fiscally responsible versus I want to save money, everything changes. When someone says I'm indistractable versus, I'm trying to use my phone less. Big difference.
There has to be a little bit of momentum, I think. Like, I think it's very hard to wake up one day and say, I'm an athlete, I'm going to run a marathon, having never run a mile before, right? But if you say, I want to become an athlete, I'm interested in being an athlete, I could imagine being an athlete, I have no idea if I can do it, I'm going to go run for 5 minutes, I'm going to run for 10 minutes. And then you're like, I did it, I survived, my pants didn't light on fire. Maybe tomorrow I'll run for 20 minutes, and the next I'll run for 30 minutes. Because I don't think, this idea of just having identity shift has to come from some form of confidence. And I think it's really hard to find confidence if you don't have some competence in the beginning. And I think being able to say, I ran a 5K, maybe I could do a 10K. I've done a 10K, maybe I could do a, half marathon. it's got to come from somewhere. So where do you get the confidence to have that identity shift? It can't just come from what you want. Like I have so many people who come to me with their big hairy ideas and their big audacious goals and all those things, and they don't do them because they're these like look good goals. Like they look good on the wall and on their vision board, but they don't really want them. You know, I always say busy's bullshit. Like people are like, oh, I really want to run a marathon, but I'm too busy. I want to go back to school, but I'm too busy. I want to lose weight, but I'm too busy. I want to get the report, but I'm too busy. Busy's bullshit. Like you make time for the things you actually want to do. And also, it's okay if you're like, you know what? I don't want to lose weight. I'm happy just like I am. I don't want to
Yeah.
run a marathon. I don't want to go back to school. People don't want to admit that they don't want to do the look good goals. But in
Right.
order to actually have the confidence to have that identity shift to the thing you actually really want to do, when you have no track record of having any clue, like there's only so many of us that are like these like harebrained crazy people that are like, sure, I've never run a mile. I'll sign up for the Boston Marathon and see what happens. Right. Like
Yeah.
how do you make that identity shift from a place of you know, from day zero?
Yeah. So the first overarching mantra that I want folks to remember is consistency over intensity. Consistency over intensity in all things, right? You want to be you want to reach financial security. It's not about, you know, starting a lemonade stand and working real hard to make money over a weekend. You know, you build a business over years and years. Consistency over intensity. You want to get in shape. It's about consistency. You don't, you know, you see these people who make a New Year's resolution and they fail by February. They stop because it's, you know, they're really intense and sweating all over the place for a month, but then they don't keep it up. It's about consistency over intensity. Same with relationships. You know, you don't build a good marriage by taking your spouse out to a nice dinner. You build it over years, getting through trials and tribulations together. It's about consistency over intensity. Well, how do we build consistency over intensity? We have to reimagine these three things. We can reimagine our temperament. So temperament are these immutable traits that we think about ourselves. So that's what we talked about earlier. We define ourselves differently. We use monikers and identities that serve us as opposed to us serving. So stop with the I'm bad at time management or moralizing and medicalizing, and instead use a moniker that serves you. Have a new identity. That's very, very important. So for example, when you say, well, how can I call myself an athlete if I haven't yet run the marathon? Well, reimagine what it means to be an athlete. To me, an athlete is someone who consistently exercises. That's it. Doesn't have to be someone who says it has to be running a marathon. It's someone who consistently exercises. Well, do I consistently exercise? Yes, I'm an athlete. I redefine that, and that's who I am. Next thing we can do is to redefine the task, right? So part of the problem, I think, particularly when it comes to athletics, is that we think, you know, these silly mantras of no pain, no gain, right? It has to hurt or it's not working.
Yeah.
I think that's ridiculous. So I used to be clinically obese. Today, I'm 44 years old. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm not saying this to brag because I don't have good genes. I'm not particularly athletic, but today I have six-pack abs. I've never had that before. Why? It's not because I was born with good genes. I exercise and eat right consistently. That's what it's all about. So how do I reimagine the task? When I first started running, which by the way, I hated. Okay. I used to be clinically obese. I hated exercise. When people
I've
say,
run
oh,
5 marathons and I still hate running. So if
there
you
you
figured out how
go.
not to hate running, please tell me.
Exactly. See, thank you. People think, oh, well, it's so easy for the
You must
people who do
love
it.
it. No.
No, not necessarily. But how do
Or
you
you've
get
got
started?
that near magic. You've got that
Yeah.
LGO magic. It's like, no,
Yeah, it
I
must
just,
be. It must be.
I'm just willing
Right.
to be
Something
less
about you.
comfortable.
Exactly. That's a
Yeah.
big part of it. But how do you get started? You get started early on by using what I call a MIA. A MIA is a minimal enjoyable action, MEA, minimal enjoyable action. By
Okay.
redefining the task as something that I can do that I actually enjoy, this is how we build our agency, our ability to prove to ourselves that we can do it. So when I started running, and literally, I never ran consistently. I hated it. And so instead I said, look, I'm just going to do my MIA. I'm going to go to what I currently enjoy. At the time, I liked walking, right? I would walk around my little neighborhood around in Palo Alto. It was very nice. Like I would do that for 20, 30 minutes and enjoy it very much. So I said, look, that's what I'm going to do, but I'm going to put time on my calendar to do my MIA consistently. And then one day I said, okay, let me see if I can run for 30 seconds. It literally was down one block, maybe even less, right? 30 seconds. As soon as it was no longer enjoyable, I went back to my MIA. And so by doing that, you know where this story goes, right? The 30 seconds became a minute, became 2 minutes, became 5 minutes. Today I can run 4 miles and I actually enjoy it. right? And I've been doing that for years now, and I've gotten in the best shape of my life because I reimagined the task. The task didn't have to be, oh, I have to finish the marathon, I have to finish the 5K. The task is, I got to just do this consistently and enjoy it. Make sure I enjoy it. And I started bringing awareness to what I did enjoy. So at the time, this is going to sound silly, but I remember thinking, I'm going to focus on the feeling of the wind in my hair because I never ran, being obese, you can't run very well. At least I couldn't. And so I wanted to focus on what was enjoyable, to look for the fun in that behavior itself. And so that's how we reimagine the task as well.
That's fantastic. I have people. So I ran the very first mile of my life right before I turned 40, and I'm just turned 51. So this is finding my inner athlete is like, I had no idea she was in here. Like I had every excuse in the world to get out of PE, not because I was obese, because I was just a lazy sack of shit. It's really all that it came down to. And right before I turned 39, or sorry, right before I turned 40, I was 39 years old. I walked into my kid's school, and the head of my kid's school was standing there, and she's a 65-year-old woman named Ellen, and she looked amazing. And I hadn't seen her in like 6 months. Because I'd been traveling, I was dropping my kids off from school, days she wasn't out there. I just hadn't run into her. And I was like, Ellen, you look amazing. Like, what's going on? Like, you've lost a ton of weight. Either you've been really sick or there's a new man in your life. And you look way too good to have been really sick. So what's his name? And she was like, well, I do have a new man in my life, and his name is Mike, Coach Mike. And then she proceeded to bring me to this boys and girls club, this like, dark basement gym, and we would do calisthenics for 45 minutes. At the end of the 45 minutes, Coach Mike would invite you to the opportunity of running a mile, and he would hand you these 37 little teeny straws, and you'd have to throw one down every time you went around. He took 37 loops around this gym to get to a mile, and it took me 6 full weeks, Nir, to get to 37 laps without needing to like lean over and huff and puff and actually puke at times. But at the end of it, I was like, well, what do you know? I ran a mile. If I string 3 of those together, I can run a 5K. So I signed up for a 5K with Ellen and with Coach Mike's, of course, I need the accountability. And 6 weeks later, we're huffing and puffing up Heartbreak Hill, the little, 5K in my neighborhood. And I did it. And then I was like, well, what do you know? I did a 5K. And it's the same thing, right? This happens. But people are like, oh, well, you're in such good shape, Laura. Like, I should run, but I hate running. And I was like, well, then you shouldn't run. Like, you should like, and I think that's what happens. I after I started running, then I joined this gym and I met with this trainer and I lifted weights with him a little bit. And at one point I was like, I don't think you're working me hard enough. I'm never sore. And he said, Laura, if we do it right and we progress right, you shouldn't be sore. But we have this illusion of exertion, right? Like if it's not so hard and it's not so horrible, then it must not be changing us, right? Like we think, and I think that's why people's New Year's resolutions fail, because they go so hard, all in. They go from like December 31st, I'm going to eat every snack in 7-Eleven and drink all night long, to I'm going to wake up on January 1 and it's going to be all kale. Like, why do you think we fail? Because there's like, you cannot be indistractable if you are not setting good habits, right? And sort of creating over time these consistent habits and these commitments to yourself and to other people. So it's this all in. It has to hurt. It has to be horrible for me to be effective and me to be good. Like the fact that you have 6-pack abs and you run 4 miles a day, like that's great. Like most people would think that's impossible to do.
Well, here's what's interesting about this, and I think what's kind of difficult to understand is that there's actually a time and a place where we want to minimize discomfort when we're just getting started, right? But then we have to find a way, if this is important to us, to get over that discomfort, to deal with that discomfort, right? When it becomes something that is really important to us. Because look, I think part of I think the disservice that a lot of the self-help industry promotes is that we're supposed to be happy all the time. That if you're not doing something with passion and it's easy and it's wonderful and you're so excited to do it, that you're doing something wrong. But a lot of times the things that we want to do with our time and attention is difficult, right? You talked about how running is still hard for you because you're at this level where you're trying to improve. So the opposite of a habit is deliberate practice. That deliberate practice, the 10,000 hour rule, we've all heard about the 10,000 hour rule. It's not just doing the thing for those hours, but it's actually consciously thinking about those things. It's actually the antithesis of a habit. It requires hard work. And so for those type of tasks, we need to be able to turn on this ability to deal with discomfort in a healthy way. So it is about knowing kind of what stage you're in. It's kind of like a phase change when, a water phase changes into ice. There's that phase change. It's a different tool for the job that you need to be able to access for when you need to do the task that, look, is going to be hard. Writing, for example, right? I've written 2 bestsellers. You've written as well. It's hard work, right?
Hard
So
work.
even though it's something I want to do, when I first got started, it was purely about pleasure, right? Just to get started. But now that I want to, when I want to finish a book, when I want to finish an article even, I have to use certain tactics that keep me on task by dealing with that discomfort.
So the discomfort thing I think is so interesting. So, now that I found my inner athlete, I've become a rower, and rowing is a sport that is, it is famously painful. It is
Mm,
famously uncomfortable. The pain cave was invented in a boathouse, I'm convinced.
mm,
And the very first time I rowed my first race, and I'm in a boat of 8 women, right? So there's 8 women in a coxswain, and we're heading down the Charles River, and it's like boom, chunk at like 36, 38 strokes per minute. You can't stop because the
mm,
oar is going to come back right into your ribs. You're going to get thrown out of the boat. You'll have broken ribs in the process, and you're going to drown in the Charles, which is probably better than the staph infection or E. coli or whatever it is you're going to pick up in the Charles anyway. So you don't want to end up in the Charles. And I remember we were at 750 meters of this 1,000-meter race, and all of a sudden I could feel this, I wouldn't say pain in my chest, but I felt
mm,
pressure in my chest. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, what is happening now? Foom, chunk the whole time. I wonder what's going to happen. Is my heart going to explode? Are we going
mm,
to win? Am I going to die? What's going boom, chunk the whole time, back and forth. And then the race finished, and I was fine, and it was great, and we won, and it was amazing. But I was like, I'd gone from the I don't like pain, this is uncomfortable, I should just stop, to this is fascinating. What's
mm,
happening to me? Let me notice and identify the feeling and sit with it and be in it, because now I understand that the when I run a marathon, it takes me 4 hours to get to the end. No matter how hard I work, I have not broken that 4-hour mark yet. And the person who won the marathon, some like Ethiopian or Kenyan gazelle that's like flown through it like 2 hours and 2 minutes or whatever it's going to take,
mm,
both of us are working at 100% of what we were capable of doing on that day. And I think, Nir, that both of our pain caves feel exactly the same to
mm,
us. Now, it looks very different on paper, right? Like they're breaking the sound barrier, and I'm still like chugging away, like dying on the way,
mm,
thinking I'm actually gonna, need a medical tent. But I think that feeling of being at whatever the 100% of your like your discomfort is going to be, there's like a breakthrough. We think it's a breakdown, but it becomes this breakthrough. And I wonder if there's confidence in that moment that helps you stay indistractable longer the next time and the next time and the next time. So is it like, as part of that is a very long story to get to the question of, is the deliberate practice, part of deliberate practice, staying just a little longer than you want each time in the discomfort?
That's a big part of it. So one of my favorite techniques that I learned in researching the book comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's called the 10-minute rule. And the 10-minute rule says that you can give in to any distraction. So if you're on a diet and you're trying to not eat that chocolate cake, you're trying to quit smoking, can you resist a little bit? Can you you're working on a big project and then you want to check email or look at social media? What do? You can give in to that distraction, but not right now. Why is this so powerful? Because we know that abstinence can backfire. That when we tell ourselves not to do something,
Mhm.
it's almost like pulling on a rubber band. When you pull on a
Mhm.
rubber band, you pull, 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 pull. Eventually, you can't pull anymore. When you let go of the rubber band, where does it go? It doesn't go back to where it started. No, it ricochets across the room. So when we tell ourselves not to do something, you tell yourself, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, fine, I'll give in. When we actually do give in, it feels good because we have satiated the discomfort of not telling ourselves not to do something.
I mean, the number of times that I have not wanted to have an Oreo and then later I have an entire pint of ice cream. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Across
So
the room. There
abstinence.
we are.
That's right. That's right. So telling yourself not to do, I mean, this is called psychological reactants. And so this happens anytime someone tells you what to do. When our autonomy is threatened, the natural response, everybody feels it, is to rebel. So when your mom told you, put on a coat when you were a kid and you're like, don't tell me what to do, or your boss micromanages you, that feels bad. Here's the crazy part. We all know what reactance feels like when others do it to us. Here's the crazy thing about our brain. We elicit reactants even when we tell ourselves to do something. That's how weird our brains
We are our own worst enemies here.
Yes,
this is
yes,
the headline here.
So what do you do about this? So it turns out the solution is not, Nancy Reagan, just say no type, just stop using your cell phone. Don't do it. That actually makes it worse. What you want to do is to say, hey, look, I'm a grown up. I can do whatever the hell I want. I can give into that distraction, but I choose not to. For just 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Most people do it the opposite. Most people say, I'll just do it now for 10 minutes and
For
I'll go
10
back
minutes.
to my thing.
See,
Big
most
mistake. People do it the opposite way, which is I'll just keep scrolling and I can run 6 miles, or now I'm going to run 4 miles, or maybe I'll wear a ponytail. Like that's the negotiation that we do.
Exactly. If you're listening, don't do that. That has the opposite effect, because what you're doing is when you feel bad, the trigger elicits the action of relieving that discomfort with whatever you're doing. So don't do that. That's a bad idea. Don't do it for 10 minutes.
And it never only lasts for 10 minutes.
Exactly. Do it in 10 minutes. So what you're saying, so let's say, I'll give you a very personal example because I use this all the time. If I'm writing, right, and we both know as authors, writing is really hard work. Writing cannot be a habit, because a habit is defined as a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. I don't know how to write with little or no conscious thought. You have to think.
And if you figure that out, I hope you write your next book on that. Because that book will be in depth. Yeah, that'll be a huge seller. Yeah.
Exactly. So if it's hard work, the idea here is, while I'm writing, all I want to do is check email or social media or the news or do something that's not the work I need to do. What I tell myself is I can give into that distraction. Okay, I'll go Google that thing or go check email in 10 minutes. So I set a timer for 10 minutes, and my job, I have a choice to make on this fork in the road. I can either get back to the task at hand, right? Go back to writing, or do what psychologists call surf the urge. Surfing the urge acknowledges that these uncomfortable sensations, these internal triggers, they're transitory. They're like waves. They crest and then they subside. And so your job is to ride that wave like a surfer on a surfboard. Because when you feel stressed, anxious, uncertain, you think that's going to last forever. It never does, right? But in the moment, you think it will last for a very long time. But if you can just ride that wave for 10 minutes, and I show you in the book what kind of internal dialogue to have with yourself while you're riding that urge, if you can ride it out for 10 minutes, what you will find is 9 times out of 10, you'll be back into the task at hand before that alarm rings. So if you can just help yourself say, I'm just going to do this thing for 10 more minutes. I'm going to resist the chocolate cake for 10 more minutes, and then I'll eat it in 10 minutes. I'll keep writing for 10 more minutes. I'll keep exercising for 10 more minutes, and then I'll do the thing that I really want to do. That's fine. What you will find is that once you prove to yourself, back to your question earlier of how do you prove agency and self-efficacy, this is how you do it. Because the 10-minute rule becomes the 12-minute rule, becomes the 15-minute rule. And now you realize, wait a minute, I'm not at the mercy of these distractions. I can control them. Look, I did it again and again and again. And so over time, you're building this capacity to resist temptation by learning one of these techniques to master these internal triggers.
Oh, I love that. And I think my pal Rahaf Harfouch, who I think well, is she author of Hustle and Float. She writes a lot about humane productivity and what our work cycles are. And there are some people who can dip right into a work cycle and just start writing, start working, start doing. And for others, it takes longer to sort of get into the sort of being productive, being, having the words flow, being able to do what you want to do. And if you're somebody who can get in and out of your work cycle quickly, then delaying for 10 minutes, going to do the thing, coming back, fine. But if it takes you 20 minutes to get into a work cycle and your work cycle lasts a good 2 hours when you're in it, the danger of being distracted, you can lose a whole morning. You can lose a whole afternoon. Like 2 distractions, your day's gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens all the time. And the most sinister form of distraction is the kind that people don't even realize is happening. Because here's what they do. They say, okay, I've got that big project to work on, right? I've got to finish that proposal. I got to make my sales calls. I got to, work on that thing that I've been delaying. I'm going to get started on it. Here I go right now. Nothing's going to get in my way. But first, let me check some email.
Mm-hmm.
And we justify that saying, well, email is a work-related task, right? Let me
Let me
just
make sure
tick
there's
off.
no fire burning.
Yeah, there's no fires burning, right? Or
Right.
let me check off a few things on my to-do list. Let me
There's a
just do the
fire
easy
burning, they'll
stuff real quick.
call you.
Exactly.
They're gonna
And
show
what
up in your office.
and it can't wait like 20 minutes for you to finish this really important task. So the
Yeah.
problem is that people, we think of distraction being social media or Netflix. That's actually not the biggest source of distraction. The biggest source of distraction is the distractions that trick you into prioritizing the urgent and the easy work at the expense of the hard and the important work. Because you think, well, it's a work-related task, right? I got to do this at some point. But if it's not what you said you were going to do with your time, it's a distraction. Even if it's a work
Right.
distraction, it's
Right.
still a distraction.
Well, and if your calendar and your email is being dictated by the needs of someone else, it's never gonna be dictated by the needs of you. The last thing I wanna ask you about is this idea of, I've just lost my train of thought on it. I wanna talk to you about homeschooling, but there's one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, which I maybe it'll come back to me. So a lot of us over the course of, the pandemic have been homeschooling our kids, right?
Mhm.
Uh, how do we, at a place where we have been so busy being all things to all people all the time, get back into the focus that we've now spent 2 years? Maybe if we've had good habits, we've sort of lost some of those habits. We've got to like regroove old patterns. Are there tips and tricks and things that we should be doing to get ourselves back into being indistractable again as life begins to, I'm not going to say go back to normal, but find
Mhm.
whatever the next normal is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest learning for me from the 5 years writing Indistractable, which by the way, it took me 5 years to write because I kept getting distracted. It wasn't until I learned these techniques and figured out, what works, not only what's been scientifically validated, right? Nothing in the book is just my pet idea. These
Mhm.
are, there's 30 pages of citations from peer-reviewed studies in the book. But once I learned these strategies, then everything changed. But the biggest mantra that I repeat daily is that the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. Let me say that again. The antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. That it doesn't matter what the distraction is, right? It could be the cigarette, the chocolate cake, the social media. It doesn't matter. There is no distraction we can't overcome if we plan ahead. This is our amazing evolutionary adaptation, is that human beings can see into the future better than any animal on the face of the earth. We can imagine what's going to happen. If you wait till the last minute, you will lose. Okay. If you sleep next to your cell phone at night, it's going to be the first thing you reach for in the morning, right? If you light the cigarette and it's in your hand, you're going to smoke it. If the chocolate cake is on the fork, you're going to eat it. It's too late. You have to plan ahead. And so everything in Indistractable are simple techniques. There's a lot there, but there's something that anybody can do right away to start planning ahead, to use our foresight. That the antidote to impulsiveness, that's all this is. All distraction is a fight against impulsiveness. But there is no distraction that we can't overcome if we plan ahead.
So this is like reducing friction. So, if you want to get up and go running in the morning, laying out your clothes so you don't have to think about it. It's like you're taking away all the things that are going to get in the way of, well, I don't know, I got to get up, I got to pick up my clothes. But if they're right there at the
It's
end
a
of your
little bit
bed,
more systematic than that, because I
okay,
tried that technique of like, oh, there's my tennis shoes. Yeah, but I don't feel like running. Screw
okay,
that.
okay.
So it's very important that we do these things in order. Number one, you have to deal with mastering internal triggers, because as I said, the shoes could be right there. Just go on the run, but I don't feel like it.
Yeah, it's still 15 degrees outside. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't feel like it. You have to know how to deal with discomfort. That is number one. If you don't know how to deal with discomfort, forget it. Nothing else will work. None of the tricks, none of the life hacks, all of it's garbage if you don't first know how to deal with internal triggers. Then number two, make time for traction. So the shoes can be right there, ready to go, but have you planned the time in your schedule, or are you trying to juggle a million different things because you're using a stupid to-do list rather than time boxing your day? The time has to be scheduled.
Hmm.
Number three, hacking back the external triggers, making sure that there aren't other pings and dings pulling you away from what you plan to do. And then finally, making a pact. So we've got effort packs, price packs. We talked about identity packs. When I got into exercising, one of the things I did was I made one of these pacts. I read that one of the most successful studies, the most successful smoking cessation study, was when they paid people, sorry, let me change that. They actually got people to pay themselves, to make a bet
Yeah.
on themselves. So as addictive as we think nicotine is, did you know that the most effective smoking cessation study in history, all it required was people making a $150 bet with themselves that they would quit for something as addictive as nicotine? So what did I do? I adapted this. And so what did I do? I made a pact for myself that I would exercise 6 days a week. So in my dresser, there's a calendar. And on the calendar, on today's date, is a $100 bill. And above this calendar is a Bic lighter. And every day I have a choice to make. This is called the burn or burn technique. I can either burn some calories. So I do something, right? Go on a walk, go on a run, do some push-ups, go to the gym, some kind of physical activity to burn some calories, or I have to burn the $100 bill. I have to light it on fire. I can't give it away. I have to light it on fire. Now, this seems extreme. I've been doing this for 4 years now. I've never burned the money. Why? Because I do the stupid push-ups. I've made a pact with myself that my integrity is worth more than me skipping out on this task. But if I skip that step, right? If I went straight to using one of these price packs without doing the other 3 steps, it would fail. It would not work. If you're listening to this, don't say, oh, this is a great idea, I'm going to jump to it. If you don't first master the internal triggers, make time for traction, hack back the external triggers, making the pack won't work. But if you do them in order, right? If you do them together, then they work.
That's fantastic. And I'm so glad that you clarified, because I'm I'm worried about getting hate mail that people are like, I've burned so much money. But here's the other thing I like about that. You don't say, I'm going to run 4 miles 6 times a week. You say, I'm going to do some sort of physical activity, right? And it goes back to the Mia, right? It has to be something. It doesn't have to be all, it doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing ever. So I think that's terrific. I cannot, because it is now late my time and I've been talking into a camera all day long, remember what that last question was that I wanted to ask you, but I will email it to you tomorrow morning when I wake up and I'm like, oh, that was the question. And then we'll put it in the show notes, because you are awesome. And I know that you will answer the question, but oh my gosh, I'm very sorry about that. Nir, I think you're fantastic. I've learned so much. I'm going to start doing a whole bunch of these things myself, because I got to finish this next book. I'm 75,000 words into my next 60,000 word book. So I got to now do the hard work of editing it and rereading all my words and all that stuff that I can't stand. But your book, Indistractable, How to Control Your Attention and Choose Your Life, is phenomenal. I loved it. I loved Hook. It's really terrific. And I haven't done it yet, because I have a little light outside my door that says on air, so my family knows not to come in, but I am going to cut out the little red light, don't come in little tool that you have in here. And I will recommend it to anybody who's listening. So for anyone who's listening or who's been watching, how can they get in touch with you, learn more, read more, sign up, get all the good near and far stuff?
Sure. So the blog again is Nir and Far, Nir spelled like my first name, Nir and far.com. And if you go to indistractable.com, there's actually an 80-page workbook that we couldn't fit into the final edition of the book. Talk about trimming down the words. So there's an 80-page workbook. You don't have to buy the book to get it. It's completely complimentary. And that's at indistractable.com. That's spelled I-N, the word distract, A-B-L-E, indistractable.com. And both books are available wherever books are sold.
Thank you so much for being my guest today.
My pleasure. Thank you.